Our protagonist was just chatting with his wife on the phone when suddenly a man tried to kill him. Unfortunately for the attacker, our protagonist isn't ordinary. It turns out he is one of the strongest assassins and killers in the country, so taking out the man was easy. However, he didn't expect to be betrayed, and soon his enemies came after his family. In the end, he swears that he is coming for them and their backers to get his revenge. The story begins on the day Red Shirt, the top Korean assassin feared by many, and the man who had carried the company for so long, suddenly decides to retire. His boss doesn't seem to like the idea of one of his best men walking away. When one of his subordinates suggests killing our protagonist, the boss immediately stops him. Instead, he tells our protagonist that he is free to leave. After all, it would be pointless to shed each other's blood over this. The first person to receive news of his retirement is our protagonist's wife. While on the bus, he asks how their son is doing. His pregnant wife calls him silly, but happily tells him that the baby kicked. At that moment, our protagonist feels like the luckiest man alive. He has finally left his former life behind, and is now looking forward to meeting his child. However, in that very instant, he senses bloodlust as a man attempts to kill him. Our protagonist easily evades the attack. He may have retired from being a killer, but his instincts and killing intent remain razor sharp. Meanwhile, his wife is still on the phone as panic spreads among the passengers. One of them even considers calling the police. The assassin notices this and tells them they are not his targets, giving them a chance to escape. Everyone flees, everyone except our protagonist. Because of this, he quickly hangs up, promising to call his wife later. The fight resumes, but unfortunately for the nameless assassin, our protagonist holds his title for a reason. Grabbing the man, our protagonist counters with a single punch, the force knocking him off his feet. Without hesitation, he follows up with another strike while the man is still on the ground, then grabs him by the throat and begins choking him. He demands to know who sent him. The man, now missing a tooth, laughs. He says that this is exactly what he expected from our protagonist. He reveals that he has no information about his colleagues, but adds that all of them are targeting him. With his final breath, he declares that nobody leaves the company and survives. A sense of dread washes over our protagonist. He immediately calls his wife to warn her, but her phone isn't connecting. Meanwhile, at home, his wife has just finished making dinner, hoping he will return soon. Then, there is a careful knock on the door. As she approaches, she asks for the person's identity. The man outside claims to be her husband's colleague and says he personally came to deliver his retirement package. Mi-yu feels confused, as her husband never mentioned anything about retiring. But soon, she realizes something is terribly wrong. Seeing a group of men, she instantly understands they are dangerous. She tries to run but falls, then begins pleading for her life. However, she is grabbed by the hair. The man steps forward to finish her, revealing himself to be the same assassin from earlier. Meanwhile, our protagonist sprints toward his house at full speed. His wife not answering his calls only makes him more anxious. By the time he finally arrives, he sees footprints everywhere. His face drains of color as he realizes he is too late inside. The man responsible for killing his wife casually comments on his late arrival. While eating the food she prepared, he tells our protagonist that he never mentioned expecting a child. He asks if that was the reason our protagonist betrayed the chairman, adding that he never thought our protagonist would care about something so trivial. The audacity, he speaks as if they were friends. In response, our protagonist asks if the chairman sent him. The man replies that the chairman did not send him. He made the decision on his own. He then goes on to insult our protagonist's wife and unborn child. At that moment, our protagonist's anger reaches its peak. The man gives the order to kill. The first attacker charges with a knife, but our protagonist sidesteps and breaks his arm. As the man screams in pain, our protagonist seizes the opportunity to take his knife and kill him instantly. The others rush in at the same time, but our protagonist deals with them effortlessly. In the end, none of them are able to take him down. Seeing this, the man comments that our protagonist is finally starting to look like himself again. Apparently, this is why he is known as Red Shirt. Now he invites our protagonist to come play. Our protagonist accepts. At first, the fight seems evenly matched, but the man proves to be more tactical, landing a minor injury on our protagonist. In response, our protagonist tackles him, and both crash onto a table. As our protagonist moves in for the kill, the man tilts his head slightly. He had already anticipated the attack. Seizing the moment, he strikes back. But then, something changes. The man suddenly realizes he has been cut. Despite his injury, he continues fighting, But now he begins to suffer heavy punishment from our protagonist. Unable to go on any longer, he curses him. In response, our protagonist slaps him. At that point, the man admits he was no match for him. Even so, he still managed to kill his wife and child. Before he can say anything more, our protagonist doesn't waste another second. He ends his life. Afterwards, our protagonist begins cleaning up the bodies one by one. As he does, he reflects on everything he has lost: his wife, his dream of a normal family. Now, the mother of his child lies lifeless. In the next scene, our protagonist lays them to rest. He also takes this opportunity to inform his former boss that some of his men came to his house. The boss asks if he killed them. Of course, our protagonist confirms. His employer admits that it was the fault of his direct subordinate, apologizing and offering condolences. But he isn't finished. Lee Kwang-won tells him that although his subordinate acted foolishly, he was still part of his family. Because of this, he has no choice but to send the entire organization after him. Our protagonist listens quietly, watching as his wife's body is about to be incinerated. Then he finally speaks. There's no need for that, because he will be the one coming, and just like that, our protagonist steps fully into his villain arc. And so our protagonist begins plotting his plan for revenge. To make it happen, he needs to visit a particular man. With that in mind, he leaves his house, saying he will be back as if speaking to his deceased wife. In the next scene, two men are talking about him. One of them, a bald man peeling an apple, comments on the sudden request from HQ for more manpower. In response, his colleague wonders aloud how many men they need just to catch a single person. Hearing this, the bald man continues peeling his apple and explains that our protagonist wiped out an entire team. He even mentions that Lee Kwang-won personally ordered the cleanup of their bodies. His colleague, still skeptical, questions whether the chairman truly considers them family. He sees nothing special about a group of men who got themselves killed trying to take down one person. In fact, he mocks them, calling their skills pathetic. The bald man agrees. After all, they went up against our protagonist. He adds that the company has chosen the wrong opponent this time. Just like John Wick, our protagonist isn't just a legend, he's a man of absolute focus. Once he starts moving, bodies are bound to follow in his wake. He even predicts that, at this rate, war is inevitable. His friend warns him not to exaggerate, calling him a bastard and reminding him that rumors can easily get out of hand. After all, what can a single man really do against an entire organization of assassins? Unfortunately, that single man walks into the room at that very moment. His presence alone freezes the entire room. Even the bald man's eyes widen in shock as he recognizes him. Ignoring their reactions, our protagonist calmly asks to see their boss. The others begin to wonder if he came for them and why he isn't heading straight to headquarters. Meanwhile, the bald man's friend, who had been trash-talking him earlier, sees this as the perfect opportunity. He tells our protagonist he's surprised he came here alone instead of going to HQ. Then, looking at him coldly, he adds that he must have some serious guts. The fool even grabs our protagonist by the shirt and orders someone to lock the door. Our protagonist simply stares at him, as if deciding the best way to end him. But before things can escalate, a man with crutches and missing a leg enters the room, telling them that's enough before an accident happens. He understands his men's reactions. After all, things have been chaotic lately because of our protagonist. So he asks him to understand their situation. Hearing this, the bald man's friend asks if their boss is really going to let him off. Instead, the boss tells Dukan to bring coffee, insisting that our protagonist is a guest. As he sits down slowly, he admits he's curious about the sudden visit. He asks directly why our protagonist chose to come to someone like him, an old man operating from the shadows. Our protagonist gets straight to the point. He knows the old man still has men at HQ. What he wants is simple: gather them and prepare a car. Because he plans to kill Chairman Lee Kwang-won. The old man's expression immediately turns serious. Dukan, enraged, demands to know what nonsense our protagonist is spouting, but his boss orders him to stay out of it. The old man then asks if it isn't too late to move against the chairman. The battle for succession ended long ago, and he was pushed out by both the chairman and the Neville family. His current life is no different from exile. In other words, he no longer has the power to support such a plan. Not to mention, if he were to hand our protagonist over to Lee Kwang-won, the situation would greatly benefit him. He asks what our protagonist thinks about that. In response, our protagonist calls him a fool. He points out that the old man is still afraid of his younger brother, and perhaps even afraid of losing his remaining leg. Dukan is instantly enraged, but the old man tells him to calm down. However, Dukan ignores the order. He never liked our protagonist to begin with, and now he sees his chance. Promising to handle the situation, he grabs our protagonist, intending to drag him out and teach him a lesson. But in the very next moment, our protagonist drives a knife into his back. He follows up with multiple strikes, brutally injuring him. The entire room watches in silence, unable to intervene. Dukan drops to his knees, calling our protagonist a bastard. But our protagonist isn't finished. Grabbing him by the hair, he ignores his groans of pain and slams his face onto the table. Once, twice, again and again, until Dukan finally loses consciousness. The same man who thought he could handle our protagonist is now completely broken. With that, our protagonist turns to the old man, No.1, and asks if what he has seen is still not enough. He declares that he will take care of his brother and asks if the old man is willing to join him. Before he can answer, the scene shifts to HQ. No.1 calls for a private meeting, only to notice that a few members are missing. In front of Chairman No.1 is a special group known as the Zodiac. The Zodiac Ox Deputy Director Choi Il-ho reports that the triplets have yet to arrive. The Zodiac Rat, Director Song Jae-sun, finds it amusing that they would dare to be late to a direct summons from the chairman. Meanwhile, the Zodiac Monkey manager Park Song-jae comments that the triplets are getting bolder. Right on cue, the triplets finally arrive. They enter the room complaining loudly, wondering what kind of job required their presence, especially since the chairman usually avoids calling them due to how expensive they are. The one in the center quickly tells his brothers to shut up, reminding them to show respect in front of the chairman. With everyone finally present, the chairman begins the meeting. He reveals their next target. In the end, he asks if they can handle the job. Without hesitation, the triplets request support from Team A, while confidently assuring Chairman Lee Kwang-won that they will take care of everything. Meanwhile, Lee Bong-won gives our protagonist a car key. Before leaving, he warns him that after he kills his brother, the Neville family will definitely come after him. However, the old man isn't too worried. He only hopes our protagonist is as prepared as he is. Our protagonist replies, telling Lee Bong-won to provide support if he truly wants to see his brother dead. He also suggests they meet at the company. Once our protagonist leaves, the room falls into silence, and Lee Bong-won can barely hold back his laughter. He tells his men that the time has come and that the tables have finally turned. Meanwhile, our protagonist is on his way to HQ, but just then, he notices something. A group of cars is tailing him. The triplets are inside one of those cars, and the two youngest brothers in front begin arguing. One talks about buying a game console, while the other suggests getting a washing machine after the job is completed. Just like that, the banter continues, and they almost forget about the mission. However, the eldest, sitting at the back, interrupts them, telling them to stop and insisting they focus. He promises to buy both things, but first, they need to deal with our protagonist. Speaking of our protagonist, while they were distracted, he suddenly stops his car and begins driving in reverse. The triplets are shocked. The one in the back seat immediately instructs the driver to step on it. Slamming the gas, they attempt to collide with our protagonist. However, in a split second, our protagonist steers his car and dodges the collision by a narrow margin. As a result, everyone hits the brakes at the same time. One of the triplets wonders if our protagonist is crazy and orders everyone to get out. Our protagonist also steps out of his car, knife in hand. Seeing that he is alone, the group believes they have the advantage. Because of this, they charge at him all at once. Meanwhile, the triplets observe the clash from inside their car. One comments that their support team is being pushed back, while another replies that they are all amateurs and that even he could take them out if he wanted to. As a result, they begin arguing once again. Finally, the eldest stops them, calling them by name, Samseok and Duseok. He tells both of them to stay alert because there's a chance one of them might not be coming back alive. With that said, the three of them step out. The eldest takes the lead, reminding them what to do. Meanwhile, our protagonist has already dealt with their support team. The moment they lock eyes, the eldest gives the kill order. And just like that, the battle begins. While fighting, our protagonist gives context about the chairman's triplets. You see, there is one thing he needs to watch out for while facing them. The triplets are experts at attacking simultaneously and coordinating their moves. That's how he manages to dodge the first attack, causing Duseok to accidentally kick the eldest in the face. However, what he didn't expect was for one of them to use another as leverage. Because of this, he is unable to react in time and receives a kick from Duseok. Seeing this, Duseok mocks him. Our protagonist immediately grabs him and slams him onto the asphalt. Apparently, that triplet had a hidden blade in his shoe. Our protagonist realizes he has suffered a cut on his lower back, and the longer the fight continues, the more disadvantageous it will be for him. In other words, he needs to end the fight quickly. Interestingly, the triplets display childish behavior, suddenly acting like kids. As a result, Samseok, the youngest, gets annoyed after being punched and screams at them to focus on our protagonist. With that, they charge at him at the same time. During the exchange, our protagonist notices Duseok preparing to strike from above. He is unable to react in time, and as a consequence, Duseok drives his knife into our protagonist's thigh. Before he can recover, he receives 3 cuts from the brothers simultaneously. Our protagonist continues fighting while trying to create distance. The triplets are veterans who have fought together for years. However, our protagonist has seen through their pattern. They rotate positions, with 2 keeping him occupied while 1 strikes at his blind spot with precise timing. At this rate, the fight will eventually be over if he loses focus. Despite this, he knows he can break their formation with the right opportunity. Seeing our protagonist deliberately cornering himself, the second brother Duseok becomes cocky. However, the eldest warns him not to let his guard down. The eldest admits to himself that while the situation favors them, his killing instincts are screaming at him. It feels as though they are the ones being cornered, not our protagonist. As he thinks this, the youngest suddenly grows impatient, irritated that our protagonist hasn't died yet. The eldest senses danger and immediately tries to warn him. Unfortunately for them, this is the opportunity our protagonist has been waiting for. He instantly grabs the youngest triplet and locks him in a chokehold, then drives his knife straight into the boy's torso. Seeing this, the 2 remaining brothers panic and beg our protagonist to wait. They surrender, offering to do anything in exchange for their brother's life. The youngest tries to threaten our protagonist, but before he can finish, our protagonist ends him. He makes it clear that none of them will be leaving alive. They might as well pick up their weapons and continue fighting. Enraged, the 2 remaining brothers grab their knives and charge forward with killing intent. This time, the exchange doesn't last long. Without their perfect coordination, our protagonist easily defeats them, starting with the eldest. After stabbing him multiple times, he delivers a swift finishing blow. Duseok watches his older brother fall. Before he can react, our protagonist kicks him straight in the face. The man sees him approaching and closes his eyes, accepting his fate. With that, our protagonist resumes his journey to HQ. At the headquarters, they receive reports that the triplets and Team A have failed. Since our protagonist's location is unknown, security is tightened. Speaking of security, one of the guards suddenly confirms his location. When asked where he is, the man anxiously replies, "Our protagonist has already arrived and is currently standing right in front of their headquarters." Hearing this, Gu Manzu demands that the man repeat himself. Since our protagonist is already in front of the building, he instructs them to hold him off, because he is on his way. Watching this, his subordinates hesitate, wondering if they should follow. In response, the team leader tells them to prepare themselves. After all, anyone who has been on the same team as our protagonist knows exactly what that means. Meanwhile, our protagonist is prevented from entering the building, and as a result, he begins drawing unwanted attention from the crowd. Soon, the security staff receive a call from the head of security, Oh Nam Wong. He insists they let our protagonist inside because too many people are watching. In addition, once he is inside, they can deal with him quietly. Because of this, the guards clear the way, allowing our protagonist to enter. However, just before he steps in, Gu Mansu stops him. He asks if it really has to come to this. Seizing the moment, he extends his condolences but insists that no matter what happens, the living must keep living. He also points out that our protagonist is blinded by rage and clearly isn't thinking straight. If he enters the company, he will inevitably die. In response, our protagonist tells him that he received the baby clothes he sent and that his wife loved them. He also thanks Gu Mansu for looking out for him before walking into the building. At this point, Gu Mansu can only stand there and watch. The moment our protagonist enters, the security guards take it as their cue to act. After exchanging signals, they all begin to move, following him simultaneously. As soon as our protagonist steps into the elevator, the men stop him and enter along with him, asking to join the ride. Once the elevator doors close, our protagonist bluntly tells them not to waste time. He suggests they get this over with quickly. Meanwhile, in the chairman's office, the chairman asks Nam Wong about his brother's men. Nam Wong informs Lee Kwang-won that all of his brother's men have had their weapons confiscated and are currently being held in the seminar room, so he doubts they will be able to get out. Still, he wonders aloud if there was really a need to go this far. Hearing this, Lee Gwang-won reveals that he discovered our protagonist had met with his brother, Lee Bong-won. Although Nam Wong might think he is overreacting, he decides to tell him a story from before he became CEO. Apparently, this was during the succession battle. At the time, Lee Bong-won ordered Gwang-won to handle the Sunwoo construction matter for him. Gwang-won was surprised and naturally asked why him, but his older brother insisted. He explained that those people were real trouble and needed to be subdued from the very beginning. Simply put, he didn't want them interfering with his project. He added that he had high expectations and that Gwang-won shouldn't disappoint him. After all, Gwang-won doesn't want to disappoint their father. Right after saying that, Kwang-won watches as his brother attends to his business. The scene then shifts to a building. Inside, we see our protagonist. Apparently, this was the first time Lee Gwang-won met him. He didn't expect the person assigned as backup to be just a rookie. Regardless, he proceeds with his father's task, but not without warning our protagonist not to do anything rash. As they enter the office, our protagonist carefully observes his surroundings and counts the number of men inside. Meanwhile, Lee Gwang-won steps forward and introduces himself as the vice president. Sneering, the man immediately demands to know his uncle's whereabouts. He bluntly tells Lee Gwang-won to bring his brother, as he has nothing to discuss with him. Our protagonist watches Lee Gwang-won awkwardly keeps his hand extended, looking like a fool. The man then informs him that he will be taking over the project, so Lee Gwang-won should be aware of that. As soon as he says this, his men immediately lock the door. At the same time, he slides a contract across the table, instructing Lee Kwang-won to stamp it. Lee Gwang-won freezes. Since negotiations are clearly off the table, our protagonist calmly steps forward. Just before the man can speak, our protagonist responds with a brutal slap across his face. Grabbing him by the hair, he tells him to listen, before slamming his head face first into the table. Our protagonist insists that this is how one should greet the vice president. As a result, the man's subordinates charge at him. But even as a rookie, our protagonist effortlessly takes them all down without breaking a sweat. Watching this, Lee Gwang-won can't believe this is the same guy he once dismissed. Regardless, the mission is completed. Later, Lee Gwang-won calls our protagonist's handling of the situation reckless, ironically, coming from the same man who stood stiff and helpless during the negotiations. Clearly, the enemy had more men, and our protagonist could sense that the situation was unfavorable. So when asked why he still chose to fight, our protagonist simply replies that he did it because he knew he couldn't lose. Now, back to the present. The chairman asks Nam Wong if he understands why our protagonist is so dangerous. He explains, regardless of ability, our protagonist never engages in fights he cannot win. In other words, he always wins. Meanwhile, outside the HQ, Lee Bong-won's team is on standby, all awaiting his order. Hearing this, he finally gives the command and even permits them to use lethal force. Now we shift back to our protagonist. He calmly exits the elevator, and despite the number of men present, he keeps walking forward without hesitation. However, one of them suddenly grows impatient, waiting for backup, so he makes the first move. Our protagonist responds instantly, countering the attack, and just like that, he incapacitates the man with ease, following up with a brutal knee strike. Watching him fight firsthand, the others are completely stunned. Seeing them hesitate, one of the men reminds the group that our protagonist is alone and that they have the numbers advantage. Because of this, they all decide to attack together. Meanwhile, in Lee Kwang-won's office, his bald-headed subordinate suggests deploying the team on standby. But when he mentions their numerical advantage, the chairman stops him. He insists that a war isn't won by numbers alone. Instead, the tide depends on who takes the lead. He then asks the man if he truly believes he could fight our protagonist if he were standing right in front of him. Furthermore, he points out that his men are just salaried workers. No matter how much they love money, they must also consider the risk of death. And those who have seen our protagonist fight firsthand will naturally think about that risk. After all, before each of them became an assassin, they were human. But that doesn't mean they will retreat so easily. After all, their target is just one person. However, things take a drastic turn when a worker reports that Li Bong-won's men have begun attacking. The others are confused, wondering what's going on. One even asks if they weren't supposed to be dealing with our protagonist instead. But Li Kwang-won seems to have anticipated this. So while his brother's men are in the process of entering the building, he summons his special group, the 12 Zodiac. He immediately begins giving orders, specifically assigning Monkey to Pig to defend the lower floors. In addition, he offers them a reward of 1 billion won. As for the rest, their job is to kill our protagonist, with a reward of 10 billion won upon success. Honestly, Li Kwang-won wants to end our protagonist with his own hands, so he makes a special offer. Anyone who brings him in alive will receive a unique position. He also makes it clear that there will be no shared rewards. Whoever deals our protagonist takes everything. Later, when the group arrives to surround our protagonist, they are surprised to see the 12 Zodiac and naturally assume they've come to support them. Ignoring them, Rat, General Manager Jae Eon-song, walks up to our protagonist, calling him team leader and informing him that he has caused a huge problem. Unfortunately, there's no turning back now. Just then, Ox, Deputy Manager Il-ho Choi, chimes in, asking our protagonist why he's done all this, pointing out how many people have already died. In response, our protagonist calmly picks up a knife and asks how much the chairman paid them. Both of them respond with puzzled looks. Taking his stance, our protagonist tells them it doesn't matter, but they'd better have been paid extremely well. That single statement causes a stir among the group. They begin whispering, wondering why some are receiving special treatment just because they work under the chairman. After all, everyone here is risking their lives. Seeing this, Rat snaps and calls them bastards, asking if our protagonist has a death wish. Pulling out what looks like shurikens, he declares that he'll grant that wish. The fight begins. Our protagonist charges forward, blocking and dodging the incoming projectiles with precision. In the process, he sends one of the men to the afterlife. Seeing this, Ox charges forward with his mace, but our protagonist easily finishes him as well. After taking down a few members of the Zodiac, the rest rush him all at once. With terrifying precision, our protagonist cuts them down in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, he notices a surprise attack coming his way, but effortlessly evades it. The attacker, now furious, begins swearing in frustration. Enraged, he launches multiple attacks using a chain weapon, but none of them manage to touch our protagonist. Seizing the opportunity, our protagonist throws his knife. The Zodiac member can only watch. And just like that, he meets his end. Our protagonist struggles slightly to stand, feeling the pain from the wounds caused by the triplets. Even so, he continues forward. Rat begins to panic, warning him not to come any closer. But our protagonist completely ignores him. In desperation, Rat turns to the remaining men and informs them about the bounty placed on our protagonist. They immediately question the amount, while one of them wonders if the Zodiac had been keeping it secret to claim the reward for themselves. Still, Rat insists that they kill our protagonist immediately. Ignoring him, the others continue discussing among themselves, until our protagonist suddenly grabs one of them by the hair, forcing him to beg for his life. But all he receives in return are looks of disdain and resentment from the others. And just like that, our protagonist ends him. He then comments on how desperate the chairman must be to place a 10 billion won bounty on his head. Turning to the rest, he asks if they need an invitation. He questions whether they aren't interested in money, reminding them that he's just one person. That single remark ignites their greed. Their eyes light up, and without hesitation they all charge at him at once, choosing money over their own lives. The next chapter takes us to the lower floor lobby. The chairman, Zodiac Dog, Rooster, Pig, and the rest are locked in a tight brawl with Li Bong-won's men. After dealing with this wave, the guys look like they've barely warmed up. Anyways, Monkey tells Dog to secure the stairs and not let any of Li Bong-won's men through. As for Rooster and Pig, their job is to take care of the entrance. As for him, he wants to solo their leader. We shift to Gu Monsu and his men entering the elevator. One of his men asks what he plans to do. Gu Monsu informs him that the president has placed a bounty on our protagonist, and if his subordinates don't want to get involved, they can leave. The moment the elevator door opens, they see a group of men running in a specific direction. Gu Monsu's subordinate is left in disbelief. The men are literally fighting among themselves in order to get to our protagonist first and secure the 10 billion won. As a result, our protagonist is slightly overwhelmed. He is constantly getting attacked from every direction. The place is an open area, so he can't make use of the surroundings to evade attacks. Even he, a top assassin, thinks his situation is hopeless. Knowing this, the men are relentless, shouting at him to die, seeing that he is cornered and currently at a disadvantage. But in that moment, Gu Mansu makes his dynamic entry, courtesy of Gai Sensei from Naruto. His kick is so powerful that it sends a man stumbling several feet. The entire group freezes, wondering what just happened. Seizing the moment, Gu Mansu shouts, telling the bastards to get a hold of themselves, asking how many people have to die before they come to their senses. Just because the president placed a bounty doesn't mean they should lose their minds. Not to mention, these guys aren't aware that one day they could end up like our protagonist once they retire. He insists the chairman can't be trusted. In addition, there's no guarantee they'll even get the 10 billion after the job is done. Even after he insists they stop, one of them asks, of all times, why now? He adds that they're assassins, essentially killers who only get paid after killing, and naturally demands to know why Gu Mansu is acting righteous. Worse, the guys begin to think Gu Mansu is just making an excuse and that his real plan is to secure our protagonist for himself. Hearing this, Gu Mansu is speechless. Now the group believes this is true. In addition, Gu Mansu's timing seems suspicious. He only showed up when our protagonist was overwhelmed and exhausted. The group becomes furious, shouting that the man is a coward trying to steal their money. Even worse, they begin accusing him of being a traitor. Meanwhile, our protagonist uses this brief window to catch his breath and plan his next move. So when the group decides to go after both Gu Mansu's group and our protagonist makes a break for it and dashes toward the exit stairway. Instantly, the group begins chasing him. Seeing this, Gu Mansu immediately tells his men to block them. However, some of them manage to reach the exit. To their surprise, our protagonist is waiting for them. Thinking he's barely holding on, the group charges toward him. What they don't realize is that this current position heavily favors our protagonist. And predictably, he's able to handle them, since now they're all coming from a single direction instead of surrounding him like before. However, the group has no clue, as their minds are focused only on killing him to secure the money. When the remaining group finally reaches our protagonist's location, they are left stunned by the sheer number of corpses. Knowing it will be difficult to charge because of this, they hesitate. At the same time, they wonder when the stairway became this long. One of the men begins climbing upward, about to propose a plan, when he realizes his companions have stopped moving. Only then does he realize in shock, after counting the number of souls our protagonist has sent to the afterlife. Seeing his reaction, our protagonist tells them to come at him. As he approaches them, he asks what they're doing. Unfortunately, the men realize too late they aren't going up against a man but the Grim Reaper himself. So when they begin begging our protagonist to spare them, he shakes his head. Instead, he tells them to come at him. He declares that the only way they will survive is if they kill him. The scene takes us to the past. Our protagonist is surprised to see his wife. Noticing his reaction, Miju asks why he was spacing out. Our protagonist sits down to explain, while his wife talks about her doctor's appointment. However, mid-conversation, she asks if he is even listening. But in that moment, something strange begins to happen. Her face is suddenly replaced by the bastard who killed her. In the end, our protagonist is pulled out of his thoughts. Apparently, he was just reminiscing the entire time. Back to the present, Gu Mansu approaches him, asking if he can walk. When he doesn't respond, he wonders if our protagonist, Cha Si-hik, is all right. In response, our protagonist gives up on answering and walks past him, prompting Gu Mansu to inform him that the chairman has locked Lee Bong-won's men inside. He offers to help, but only after cleaning up his own mess. He also mentions this as repayment for the food they ate from his wife, and since he has come this far, he should make sure to kill the chairman. We then shift to the fight on the lower floor. Dog is kicked from the stairs above and loses his life upon impact with the ground. Seeing this, both men take it as a signal to begin their fight. Lee Bong-won's man moves in and delivers a kick, which Monkey dodges, but follows up with another strike that hits Monkey in the torso. Apparently, the man Monkey is fighting is the former Zodiac Snake. It is said that he retired some time ago, more specifically, 10 years ago, so everyone wonders why he suddenly returned. During the fight, Monkey blocks a strike from Snake. Although he blocks it successfully, he still gets injured in the process. Apparently, Snake has a hidden weapon in his shoe. Pressing his advantage, Monkey is forced onto the defensive. Just then, he manages to grab Snake by the leg. Immediately, he pulls him in, and while Snake is airborne, Monkey delivers a massive punch. Snake blocks the attack, but the impact sends him stumbling before he regains his balance. Watching this, Monkey comments that Snake isn't as fast as he used to be. He figures time must be catching up to him. The narrative introduces him as the former Zodiac Snake, Han Kang-san, so Monkey naturally addresses him with honorifics as his senior. Just then, they hear the elevator coming down. The group thinks it's about time reinforcements arrive, and perhaps the Zodiac who went to kill our protagonist has returned. However, the moment the elevator doors open, the group is left in shock. It's Lee Bong-won's men. The man leading them immediately shouts for his team to kill all of Lee Kwang-won's men. Monkey observes what's happening and realizes the tide has turned. Seeing his confused expression, Han Kang-san asks why he's spacing out. Since there are only 4 Zodiac members on the lower floor, Snake concludes that the rest went after our protagonist. Resetting his shoulder, he believes that his men's arrival means all the Zodiac reinforcements and Monkey's allies have been wiped out. Monkey grows furious and calls him a bastard. Pointing out Monkey's injury, Snake tells him not to act tough. He can tell that Monkey is unable to move his right leg. Now, Monkey begins to realize the gravity of their situation. Meanwhile, on the 43rd floor, outside the chairman's office, a burly man stands guard. Suddenly, he senses someone approaching. Turning around, he sees a terrified man running, complaining and wondering where everyone went. Apparently, the man is fleeing from our protagonist. As he approaches the burly man, he addresses him as head manager Seo, believing he's been saved. However, manager Seo looks at him with disdain. Mid-sentence, the terrified man receives a brutal slap. He is taken out instantly, while head manager Seo sighs in irritation. Apparently, he is the Zodiac Dragon, and also the leader of the Zodiacs. Staring at our protagonist, manager Seo comments that it's been a while, and admits he never expected him to make it this far. He also mentions hearing that our protagonist defeated the triplets, though he expresses his dislike for them, saying they always acted like they could solve everything, yet ended up dead. Our protagonist remains silent as manager Seo continues his one-sided monologue. Suddenly, Seo launches a surprise attack. But our protagonist is so fast that he only hits an afterimage. Our protagonist responds by dodging the next attack and slashing Seo's thigh. Manager Seo grits his teeth, groaning in pain. As a result, the fight intensifies, but our protagonist is forced onto the defensive due to Seo's relentless attacks. Eventually, our protagonist loses his balance, perhaps due to the strain from fighting his way up. Manager Seo realizes this as well, and notes that our protagonist made it this far despite being in such a battered condition. He admits his strength, but declares that this is his final destination. With a sharp, precise move, our protagonist slashes Seo's wrist. As a result, Seo loses his grip on his weapon and is left stunned. Meanwhile, inside the chairman's office, they can hear the clash happening outside. Through the radio, someone reports that Lee Bong-won's men have been freed from the seminar room and asks about the whereabouts of their own reinforcements. Even worse, the Zodiacs defending the lower floor have all fallen. Because of this, Lee Kwang-won's men panic and issue a retreat. Meanwhile, we shift back to our protagonist. He manages to stab manager Seo in the shoulder, gritting his teeth. Seo admits it's not bad for someone close to death. In response, our protagonist reveals that he heard everything Seo said about the triplets. Compared to them, he bluntly states that Seo is far weaker. This enrages manager Seo. He declares that he is the leader of the Zodiacs and refuses to be called weak. Meanwhile, inside the chairman's office, Lee Kwang-won can tell from the noise outside that things are not going well. Finally, the door opens. Our protagonist slowly walks in, running purely on adrenaline. He tells the chairman that his biggest mistake was letting him into the building. After all, he personally warned him the previous day he was coming for him. The next scene takes us to Lee Bong's office. Apparently, the old man is silently waiting for a call, so when his bald subordinate notices this, he assures his boss that the situation is on their side and that they should wait a bit longer. He is confident they will receive a call from HQ very soon. Lee Bong finally speaks, saying, "It feels strange. It took him 9 years to get to this point. He has been planning, replanning, and exercising patience all this time. But thanks to our protagonist, things became different. The guy helped speed up his plan. Also, Li Bong can't believe that everything has come down to him waiting for a phone call. Although the outcome is still uncertain, he is still looking forward to the result. In fact, he even finds the feeling quite refreshing. Now we shift back to our protagonist, standing calmly in front of Li Guangwan's remaining men like he didn't just walk into a war zone uninvited. Seeing this, one of the guys tells O Nam Wang to give the order, but the man doesn't respond. At the same time, Li Bong's men finally arrive. Han Kangsan enters the office with his squad, instructing them to stop the unnecessary bloodshed. He adds that they need to focus on the main objective. Puzzled, the chairman wonders what that means. Meanwhile, the president's security team is still waiting for instructions like NPCs waiting for dialogue options. Oh, Nam Wang remains silent. At this point, the tension is so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. Meanwhile, Gu Mansu is shocked that our protagonist managed to pull off the impossible, thinking the president must have made a mistake, or be out of his mind, to make our protagonist his enemy. Regardless, O Nam Wang finally speaks, telling his subordinates to stand down. Stating the obvious, he notes that fighting is pointless and suggests they focus on surviving. Ignoring his men's puzzled expressions, he approaches Li Guang and dials his elder brother, putting the phone on speaker. Shockingly, O Nam Wang addresses Li Bong as president, revealing that he was actually working for him all along, not Li Kuang. This leaves his subordinates completely stunned. The chairman can only stare at O Nam Wang in disbelief. Meanwhile, Li Bong's voice echoes through the office, saying it's been a while as he calls Li Guang little brother. The next scene takes us to the past. Inside a car, a younger Li Guang receives a confirmation call that the job he assigned has been completed. Ending the call, he then receives a message. The message is from our protagonist's woman. Because of this, he notices our protagonist is in a good mood and naturally asks what happened. So, our protagonist explains that he prepared for his wife's birthday. He had already left her gifts at home because he knew he would be working late. Li Guang expresses surprise, saying he never imagined our protagonist had this side of him, and concludes that his wife must be the reason. Sure enough, our protagonist confirms this with a smile. Li Guang also admits he's in a good mood, and since there's nothing left for our protagonist to do, he tells him to go home and celebrate with his wife. With that in mind, he orders his driver to stop the car. Our protagonist tries to refuse, but Li Guang opens the door instead, suggesting they meet again tomorrow at work. Before leaving, our protagonist watches them drive off with a puzzled expression. Regardless, he decides to call his wife and suggests a date night. Inside the car, the driver expresses concern, asking if everything will be fine without our protagonist present. Li Guang assures him that the situation is already taken care of, adding that bringing our protagonist along would only make things more troublesome. The next scene takes us to the shipping dock. Li Guang finally arrives, and groups of people are already waiting for him. As he steps out of the car, a man opens the door for him and offers to guide him. Seeing this, one man mentions that Li Guang was chosen by the Neville family, while another says the family has just found yet another dog. Inside a shipping container, a man is hanging. This person turns out to be Li Guang's older brother. He looks confused after recognizing him. Li Guang notes that it's been a while. Still confused, Li Bong asks his brother what he thinks he's doing, questioning whether he believes he can get away with this once their father finds out. Li Guang acknowledges that his brother is the golden child, so naturally their father would go ballistic. However, he asks his brother, with everything going on, if he really thinks their father is still alive. Because of this, Li Bong demands to know who is backing him, since he couldn't have done all this alone. Li Guang responds by reminding him that the Neville family chose Dosan Construction, their family's company, as their Korean branch. But both his brother and their father refused. Since they rejected the offer, it was only natural for the family to make him a special deal. If he accepted their demands, they would make him president. In response, Li Bong calls his brother an idiot for giving away the company and becoming their dog. Li Guang replies that if not for him, the company would have been buried. In addition, the cost of going against the Neville family would be covered. As for himself, he could no longer continue living in his brother's shadow. His brother had taken all the privileges, but enough was enough. Leaning closer, he tells his brother that he has no idea what it feels like to live a life of constant neglect, so he is going to make sure his brother regrets it for the rest of his life. With that, he tells the butcher beside him to begin. Yes, the butcher. In response, the man casually asks if he wants the right or the left arm. Hearing this, Li Bong panics and begs his brother to wait. In response, Li Guang requests a leg. As for which one, that part doesn't really matter to him. With that, Li Guang leaves and the butcher gets to work. Meanwhile, his brother begins pleading, admitting his mistakes and saying he was wrong. However, Li Guang ignores him. The agonizing screams as his brother's leg is ripped off fuel his twisted joy, as if finally releasing years of suppressed rage. Seeing his cheerful yet disturbing expression, the men congratulate him on his new role as president. Now back to the present. Li Bong tells him to think of it like the previous time. He then ends the call, using Li Guang's own words against him. In the next chapter, President Li Guang tells our protagonist something. He explains that it took him 10 years to reach the position of president. Reaching for his nameplate, he asks our protagonist if he knows the meaning behind it. Our protagonist doesn't answer. So Li Guang explains that when he was little, he was very curious. He wondered what kind of power that name held. Power strong enough to make his own father trade him for it and love it so much. Back then, his father ran a small business. Their job was simply collecting money from businesses or companies that exploited other businesses or people. People were so impressed by their work that they eventually got recognized and recommended within the political and financial world. That recommendation, in turn, gave them support. In the end, the small business became large, and they ultimately evolved into the first assassin organization in Korea. Naturally, as the founder's son, he learned the art of assassination and began working at 17. Despite all this, the young president was still curious about his father's nameplate, the one that took all the love he deserved. Eventually, he discovered the reason when he finally became president. The tiny nameplate held the path he had walked and the footsteps he left behind. The nameplate was a symbol of power, evidence that everyone else stood beneath his feet. While explaining this, he waits for the sun to rise. At the same time, he uses the nameplate to reflect the sunlight. As a result, our protagonist is almost blinded by the light. His former boss seizes this chance to attack him, but our protagonist is so fast that he only hits his afterimage, and just like that, the exchange begins. During the fight, Li Guang keeps targeting and capitalizing on our protagonist's injuries. He questions him, asking if he dares to bite the hand that fed him. Our protagonist's friend is about to step in, but he is stopped. Han Kang-san is confident he can handle it and suggests that Li Guang just watch. As the fight continues, our protagonist manages to disarm his former boss. Just as he is moments and inches away from ending him, Li Guang responds quickly by triggering his hidden weapon. Our protagonist is cut and caught off guard in the process. Li Guang seizes this moment to slash him. Our protagonist evades and grabs him by the hand. And once again, he is caught off guard. Apparently, Li Guang is wearing a vest. At the same time, Li Guang strikes his previous injury. Our protagonist barely reacts to the old man's attack. To him, Li Guang is only delaying the inevitable. As the fight continues, Li Guang is eventually pushed backward by our protagonist. Because of this, he knows he will definitely die if this continues. If it wasn't for his vest, he would have died multiple times already. Because of this, he pushes past our protagonist, using his injuries to his advantage. After successfully passing him, he plans on escaping, but soon realizes he forgot that our protagonist wasn't alone. He doesn't need anyone to tell him that he's cornered. Regardless, he shifts his focus to Nam. In desperation, he asks how much his older brother paid him, saying he will pay 10 times the amount. Nam just looks at him with visible irritation, claiming they can all handle our protagonist. So Nam tells Li Guang that he hasn't changed. This time, he tells the president to handle his own business without dragging him into it. Li Guang is stunned hearing this. Shifting his gaze to our protagonist demands to know why Li Guang did it. After all, Li Guang knew the deal our protagonist made with his father. The condition was that whenever our protagonist chose to retire, no one should ask questions, much less intervene. Frightened, Li Guang claims to be ignorant. He says he was scared that after our protagonist left, he would join another organization. As a result, his company would go bankrupt. The best alternative was killing him. That's why he instructed Aku, the man who killed his wife. When his former boss asks if that bastard told him the truth, our protagonist replies that Aku was a fool from the beginning, meaning he knew from the start that it was his former boss behind everything. Hearing this, Gwang-won admits his fault, saying he did it for the company. While thinking to himself that his vision is getting blurry because of blood, he realizes he needs our protagonist to come closer. Since he knows our protagonist knows he always carries a gun, his own timing needs to be perfect. Because of this, he pretends to be even more scared, offering 10 billion to anyone willing to take our protagonist down. Our protagonist tells him that no one here is willing to stop him. He killed his wife. In other words, the only person who could stop him is dead. Seeing that the distance is right, the chairman immediately remembers and pulls out his gun. However, in the process of pulling the trigger, he doesn't even see our protagonist move before his neck is slashed. Consequently, his life begins flashing before his eyes. As we already know from a young age, his elder brother was the golden child, constantly receiving their father's attention while he remained in the shadows. The favoritism was obvious. Lee Gwang-won's achievements were dismissed, while his brother seemed to be rewarded just for being present. As a result, his resentment kept building. However, one particular memory sticks with him. He doesn't know why, but it was the day they went fishing. He caught nothing. At the end of the day, as usual, his dad and older brother were in front, talking and completely ignoring his existence. His dad manages the largest assassin organization in the country, yet he still made time for his son. Still, Lee Gwang-won doesn't understand why this memory stayed with him. Eventually, he realizes the truth, but too late. That was the day his father finally acknowledged him for the first time, even deciding to make his favorite spicy seafood soup. Now Lee Gwang-won reflects and realizes he only had the wrong impression of his father. His father truly cared about him but simply didn't know how to connect properly. Now filled with regret, he believes things would have been different if he had realized this sooner. Meanwhile, our protagonist is still furious, even after avenging his wife. He literally tells his former boss to wait for him on the other side, because he will be coming for him. Now the cleanup begins. One of Lee Bong-won's men complains, wondering why the cleanup crew started on the lowest floor. In response, his partner, while grabbing Lee Gwang-won's corpse, tells him to just deal with it. He also notes in surprise how light the dead president is. Suddenly, he is pushed aside by Oh Nam-wong. The man insists on carrying the dead president himself, perhaps as a way of paying respect. Regardless, we shift to our protagonist. He is obviously struggling, considering all the punishment he has endured. Meanwhile, his friend and Han Kang-san approaches him. Han Kang-san tells him that he is indebted to him, adding that, because of him, he was able to deal with the people who murdered the previous victim. He expresses his thanks on behalf of his employees. Showing concern, he asks if our protagonist will be fine. Because of Lee Gwang-won's death, the Neville family has lost their Korean branch, and this is beyond what they can handle. He believes the Neville family will seek revenge. When our protagonist doesn't respond, he suggests that he rest first. He tells his friend to help him while he takes care of the rest. As they leave, Han Kang-san thinks to himself that if Lee Bong-won hadn't called for backup, the result would have been different. Meanwhile, Gu Man-soo expresses shock that our protagonist is able to stand and decides to take him home. Elsewhere, a man approaches an older man in a wheelchair. The older man begins the conversation. Apparently, he knew Gwang-won and his father, suggesting he was a close friend. Regardless, he never imagined things would turn out like this. He asks the man beside him, Piljo, if he will return to work. Apparently, the man is the former head of security. Piljo explains that since things have turned out this way, he has to look after Lee Bong-won. He adds that at the current rate, the company will go under, just as its name suggests. Hearing this, the old man laughs, saying he warned the Lee boy's father, Lee Changju, not to name the company Dosan. For context, the literal meaning is lost fortune and hitting rock bottom. Turning serious, Piljo expresses concern about the Neville family. The old man replies, saying he stopped them once before, but this time will be different. He ends by saying our protagonist is going to have a rough time ahead. Meanwhile, the news begins to spread. Everyone in the company is talking about our protagonist, Cha Si-hyuk, wiping out Lee Gwang-won's company. Consequently, Lee Bong-won is informed immediately. Meanwhile, somewhere in London, at the St. Stone Hotel, a woman reads the report about our protagonist wiping out the Neville family's main Korean branch. She predicts things are going to be chaotic for a while. In addition, the one who dared to cause it had to be their very own Si-hyuk. We are finally taken to the Neville family, where a secret meeting is being held. A man asks if the contents of the report are true. Another man confirms it, adding that Li Guangwon killing our protagonist's wife started everything. He also explains that Li Guangwon acted on his own accord after the request to kill our protagonist was rejected. As a result, everything escalated to this point. A woman speaks up, saying that with this, the token of Grendel has lost its meaning, adding that they no longer have the right to hold them back. An old man agrees, saying that their branch in Korea was destroyed, so it is only natural for them to respond. With that, the leader orders that the hounds be called, because now they have a chance to meet their old friend. At the same time in Korea, Lee Bong-won holds a board meeting to discuss new governance and compliance. The board members beg for mercy. He calmly asks if they did all this just for 3 Neville family badges. They manipulated his younger brother, who didn't know any better, killed his father, and took one of his legs. His voice, filled with suppressed anger, demands to know if they did all this for 3 badges. One of them explains that they had no choice and ultimately did it for the company. Besides, it's not like they could go against the Neville family to begin with. Speaking of the Neville family, one of them tries to persuade him, saying that now that he is the CEO, it's not too late. They promise to offer more money than his late brother ever did and pledge their loyalty. They even propose using their connections to support him. In response, Lee Bong-won lets out a sigh. The only thing they care about is saving themselves. Because of this, he suggests they use this opportunity to pray, because the only thing that will save them now is ascension to heaven. Hearing this, one of them threatens him and asks if he really thinks he can handle the Neville family. Unfortunately for him, the Neville family cannot harm a man who has already lost everything he cared about. With that, he silently gives the order to dispose of them. As they are beaten to death, Lee Bong-won thinks that the only thing he can do now is wait. The next scene shifts to a building. When the elevator reaches the top floor, 7 mysterious figures come into view. The moment the elevator doors open, the leader raises both hands, followed by a routine security check. Once they are all cleared, the security guard tells them to follow him. While walking, one of the 7 complains about the regular security checks whenever they come here. Another mocks him, while the one beside him suggests he save his breath because the fool doesn't understand Latin. However, the man proves he understands Latin perfectly well. He tells the brute that in Korea, there is a saying about empty vessels making the loudest noise. Hearing this, the man is about to respond. However, before things can escalate, one of them stops the argument, reminding them that they are about to meet the higher-ups. Before entering the room, the leader reminds everyone that they are forbidden from speaking the moment they step inside. With that said, they enter the conference room. As expected, the room is heavily guarded. The leader pays respect to their superiors. Seeing them, one of the superiors assumes they already know the reason they have been summoned. Apparently, it has to do with our protagonist. He adds that the previously mentioned token of Grendel has lost its meaning. Unsurprisingly, each of the 7 possesses the same token, shaped as a scorpion tattoo on their bodies, and eventually we will learn their individual names. The superior then gives the hounds their mission. They are hereby ordered to assassinate our protagonist. The leader of the hounds nods in understanding and accepts the order to kill Cha Si-hyuk. The next scene takes us to a week later. An airplane has just landed at Korea International Airport. The hounds have just stepped down when their leader speaks. He strictly reminds everyone of their mission, adding that before the team leader arrives in Korea within a week, everyone including Cha Si-hyuk, who wronged and challenged the Neville family, must be eliminated. The acting leader is the vice leader of the hounds, Deadface. And just like that, the 6 of them, who seem like a suicide squad, depart for their individual missions. Meanwhile, we shift to Lee Bong, who is tending to a knife. He hears a knock and gives permission for the person to come inside. Entering, the person is revealed to be Piljo. He casually greets President Lee Bong, addressing him formally, and notes that it has been a while. Lee Bong chuckles in response, asking if the guy isn't tired of calling his friend Sir. Regardless, President Lee Bong admits it's nice seeing him again. Han Kang-san also admits that it feels good to have him back. Piljo jokingly replies, asking if the guy is acting stiff because of the president, and suggests he use a more casual tone before asking about No.1. Han Kang-san turns serious as he informs him that the man went to look for the previous zodiacs. Hearing this, Piljo thinks the man is attempting the impossible. Regardless, he asks how the search is going. President Lee Bong chimes in, asking if it wasn't obvious. Although the solidarity of his father's zodiac was incredible, it has already been 10 years, so recruiting them now to take revenge on the Neville family is considered impossible. Each of them probably has their own lives now, and as a result, it is impossible to get them to come back. Piljo thinks that with the way things are heading, each of them is going to die. That's when the president presents a list containing several employees of the company. Han Kang-san explains that he narrowed the list down to potential Zodiac candidates. Piljo is slightly stunned that they have only 4 members, meaning our protagonist likely killed almost everyone in the company. Still, Han Kang-san continues, revealing that the candidates happen to be guys tied to our protagonist. In addition, he finds it strange that someone with such potential wasn't noticed in the company. Piljo comments on Gu Mansu's eyes, saying they don't show greed or ambition, which he doesn't like. President Lee Bong agrees but notes that they don't have the right to be picky at the moment. They have to proceed and see what the candidates can do. The next scene shifts to Gu Mansu while driving. He reflects on the earlier conversation he had with our protagonist. Gu Mansu had informed him that President Lee Bong had literally pulled out his knife, which in their world meant he was preparing for war against the Neville family. He wanted to know what his friend would do now that he had avenged his wife. Cha Si-hyuk simply told him that he would be waiting. Gu Mansu seems confused after hearing this. However, before our protagonist could explain anything, the scene cuts to the present. After thinking about our protagonist's words, Gu Mansu concludes that he is waiting for the Neville family, and that his last words meant he would do anything necessary to survive. Moments later, Gu Mansu pulls up in his driveway. He knows that even though our protagonist has avenged his wife, he still needs an outlet for his rage. Meanwhile, as he thinks about this, he deliberately slows his steps. As for the reason, he soon realizes someone is observing his house from the driveway. Just as he waits for them to reveal themselves, a chill runs down his spine the moment he sees his mom. He immediately tells her to go back to her room. His mom doesn't understand. She explains that a group of people kept knocking on the door, and the reason she didn't open it is because they didn't respond. At that moment, they begin knocking again. Gu Mansu's mom recognizes that it's the same people. Seeing that they didn't respond as usual, she wonders if the group are just unemployed fools. Reading the situation, Gu Mansu prepares for a confrontation, insisting his mom go back to her room. Seeing her son suddenly pull out a knife from his suit, she becomes both puzzled and scared. By now, the group has already surrounded the house, forming a perimeter. As the knocking continues, Gu Mansu begins opening the door. However, before we find out what happens, the scene cuts to our protagonist. He has just finished his shower. While drying his hair, his eyes land on a card on the table. Apparently, that card wasn't there before. He immediately recognizes the Neville family crest. At the same time, his phone begins ringing. Our protagonist sees that it's one of his colleagues from work. Answering, he calmly demands to know why one of his colleagues is calling. However, he becomes puzzled when he hears nothing from the other end. Finally, a voice speaks, telling our protagonist that it's been a while. Our protagonist freezes the moment he hears the caller's voice. Addressing him by his new title as Korea's top assassin, the caller mentions that his colleague doesn't even have a screen lock, and thanks to that, he was able to connect to our protagonist. Hearing this, our protagonist addresses the Hound, calling him by name Kamiya Shin, and demands to know his current location. Kamiya is surprised that our protagonist recognized his voice after such a long time. However, it doesn't matter. Kamiya notes that he has heard about our protagonist's life in Korea, how he only lived peacefully thanks to his seal. He even mentions that he got married and that he has been happy the entire time. Then Kamiya asks if he doesn't think it's time for him to die. Our protagonist doesn't waste any time the moment he ends the call. He immediately dials the president. The scene takes us to the past inside President Lee Bong-won's house. He has just received a call from our protagonist. Cha Si-hyuk immediately informs him that the Neville family hounds have begun making their move. Surely, the president doesn't need to ask what that means. Hearing this, the president talks about how their objectives have once again coincided and asks our protagonist what he should do. Our protagonist explains that he is the one they are after. So if they can't locate him, they will naturally try to draw him out. So he is calling the president to ask for a favor. There is somewhere he needs to go, but he needs someone to go in his stead. And that person the president sends must be the strongest. Now we shift back to the present moment, just before Gu Mansu is about to open the door. Once he finally opens it, both he and his mom are left stunned for a moment. Gu Mansu breathes a sigh of relief, but demands to know why Han Kang-san came to his house. Apparently, this was the favor our protagonist asked from the president. So Han Kang-san informs him that by the president's order, he and his mom need to evacuate. Gu Mansu doesn't understand not until Han Kang-san drops the bombshell, saying that the hounds have started making their move. Seeing her son frozen, Gu Mansu's mom demands to know what is happening. In response, Gu Mansu tells his mom to grab her coat immediately, promising to explain everything later. Meanwhile, we shift back to Kamiya Shin, who is looking at our protagonist's colleague's work ID card. He finds it interesting that the top Korean assassin organization is disguising itself as a construction company. Kim Hyun-soo, however, insists that Kamiya should let him go because he has told him everything he knows, but Kamiya shakes his head. He wants to know if our protagonist said or mentioned anything about him. Kim Hyun-soo doesn't respond. Seeing this, Kamiya thinks he is pretending not to remember. If that's the case, he tells him that he needs to die while expressing how the world is filled with liars. When Kim Hyun-soo suddenly claims he remembers, Kamiya immediately grabs his head and slams it against the wall. He insists that Kim Hyun-soo speak properly. Since the guy is trying to prove he knows him, Kamiya demands that he say his name. Of course, he doesn't know it. Kamiya concludes that Kim Hyun-soo was just pretending the whole time, expressing his hatred for liars and labeling him a bad person. As a result, he kills him on the spot. Meanwhile, Han Kang-san and his men escort Gu Mansu and his mom. While running, Gu Mansu demands to know where they are heading. Han Kang-san explains that the main entrance is dangerous, so they parked the car somewhere else, which isn't far ahead. Gu Mansu nods in understanding and follows him without further questions. Meanwhile, the entire time, someone has been watching them from above. He chuckles in amusement, saying the group looks like ants. Obviously, he is a member of the Neville family hounds. Wen Kai is in charge of reconnaissance and reports on the situation. After receiving the report, two hounds intercept the group, informing Wen Kai that they have spotted the target. Seeing them, Han Kang-san stops. The smaller guy calls him an old man and jokingly suggests that he shouldn't run because of his age. They are the Vero brothers. The younger brother, Dio Vero, begins mocking them. Seeing this, the group is left surprised. Han Kang-san thinks to himself that they have figured out their location, but he doesn't know how. Because of this, he recalls his conversation with our protagonist. Back then, our protagonist had warned them that the hounds aren't regular assassins. Things might be different since they are operating in Korea, but he insisted that without more men, they shouldn't even consider fighting them. Remembering this, Han Kang-san insists that Gu Mansu and the others leave first with his mom. The group is stunned and expresses confusion after hearing this. So Han Kang-san explains that since the Vero brothers are already here, it likely means someone has been watching them and they need to leave before that person arrives. Concerned, Gu Mansu is about to say something, but Han Kang-san stops him. He tells Gu Mansu to think about his mom. Because of this, Gu Mansu can only leave, but he assures Han Kang-san that he will come back with more men. Han Kang-san replies that they will see later. Watching him leave, the younger brother calls out to his brother, pointing out that Gu Mansu is escaping and that they need to kill Han Kang-san and his men to get to him. His elder brother, Dante Orca Vero, calmly tells him that today is Sunday, meaning no fighting today. Dio explodes, asking what his brother is talking about. He questions whether he knows how much money he paid just to get Gu Mansu's location behind Deadface's back. He insists that they need to secure Gu Mansu as a hostage, since he is our protagonist's friend. Meanwhile, Han Kang-san observes the two and wonders why Dante Orca isn't making a move. According to the information they received, Dio Vero is the weakest among the hounds, meaning he should be the first target. However, Han Kang-san has just realized that he isn't alone. When he asks, his men make it clear that they will stay with him. Hearing this, he appreciates their help and informs them of his plan to take out the younger one first. All he wants is for them to keep Dante Orca occupied during that time. Meanwhile, Dio stubbornly declares that he will handle everything by himself, saying his brother will pay him back if they end up losing Gu Mansu. With that, Dio takes out his knife, insisting that they don't have time, so they should all die quickly. Han Kang-san prepares and takes out his own weapon, sneering that it won't be that easy. Meanwhile, our protagonist finally reaches his destination. Apparently, a hound has been waiting for him. The hound comments on his arrival. Our protagonist doesn't respond, while the hound notes that it's been a while. Shockingly, the hound addresses our protagonist as Senior. He is none other than our protagonist's junior colleague from Dosan Construction, Du Yuikin. The atmosphere becomes tense as both men prepare for battle. Du Yuikin moves first, tossing a small dagger at our protagonist. Dodging the first projectile, Our protagonist watches as Du Yuikin immediately follows up by launching several more. Our protagonist responds by dodging them all, even performing sick acrobatics mid-air. As he lands, both men charge at each other at the same time. During the exchange, both our protagonist and Du Yuchen seem evenly matched. Meanwhile, Du Yuchen quickly becomes arrogant after the first clash. He coldly asks our protagonist if this is all he has, because if so, he will eventually die by his hand. At this point, he's cooked. Anyone who talks like that doesn't survive past 3 chapters. Meanwhile, we shift back to Han Kang-san and the Vero brothers. Their battle begins, and Dio becomes increasingly frustrated. He wonders how Han Kang-san is managing to hold on despite the Li Guangwon zodiacs informing them that he was weak. Han Kang-san silently thinks to himself that this matchup isn't favorable. Initially, he underestimated Dio Vero, thinking he wasn't built for combat, but the guy is incredibly fast. So fast that Han Kang-san can barely keep up and can now only focus on carefully reading his movements. Just then, Dio moves in to strike. Han Kang-san attempts to block the attack, but Dio still manages to slash his arm in the process. At the same time, Dio dramatically creates distance. Rolling on the ground, he suddenly claims he's been cut and starts acting like a child. Han Kang-san is left puzzled by this childish performance, trying to understand why Dio would intentionally let himself get injured. Meanwhile, Dio continues his act, calling out to his brother and claiming to be scared, just like back then. The moment he screams for Dante to help, it's as if his brother teleports and lands a punch on Han Kang-san. Thankfully, Han Kang-san manages to block it in time. However, the impact sends him flying. The rest of the men are stunned, wondering what just happened. Meanwhile, Dio reveals a wicked smirk, having successfully used his childhood trauma to trigger his elder brother. One of Han Kang-san's men rushes to check on him. Han Kang-san explains that he's fine. Even though he blocked the attack, his right arm and ribs are now broken. Because of this, he orders his men to retreat. Instead, the men do the opposite. They ask if Han Kang-san is looking down on them. They remind him that failing to hold the enemies back would put President Li Bongwon's life in danger. Without waiting for orders, the men charge forward, confident that even if they can't kill Dante, they can at least land a hit. Han Kang-san can clearly see that his men are no match. He knows for certain that they can't win, and escaping alive is out of the question. Yet he can't help but wonder why they're still charging in despite knowing all this. Since the outcome is inevitable, and he has already saved Gu Mansu as our protagonist requested, he believes our protagonist can handle the rest. As for him, he decides to do his part, to make sure his men's lives are not wasted and to protect the president. Meanwhile, Dio observes Han Kang-san and realizes something. Just as their intel suggested, Han Kang-san fights using hidden weapons and doesn't plan on defending much, based on how he's moving. During the exchange, Han Kang-san suddenly feels his body becoming light. It's almost as if he's returning to his prime right before death. Han Kang-san leaps into the air, preparing to deliver a powerful downward strike. Just inches away from landing the blow on Dante's face, Dante dodges and counters, stabbing him while he's completely exposed. Immediately after, he grabs Han Kang-san by the hair and prepares to finish him. At that moment, Han Kang-san's mind drifts back to the past. Back then, after Li Bongwon lost both the company and his leg to his younger brother, he wanted to end everything. Han Kang-san stopped him and insisted that he keep living. But Li Bongwon questioned whether losing everything also meant losing the right to choose death. Still, Han Kang-san refused to back down and kept urging him to live. Frustrated, the president told him to take those words back, pointing out that he couldn't even stand on his own anymore. Even so, Han Kang-san told him to get up. In the end, the president agreed to live, simply because his stubborn friend wouldn't let him die. Back in the present, Han Kang-san is suddenly pushed aside by one of his men, and that man dies in his place. Seeing this, Han Kang-san becomes enraged. He remembers that back then, everything was his fault. He couldn't protect the previous president and his son. As a result, they both paid the price for losing the company. This time, Han Kang-san keeps fighting, determined not to make the same mistake twice. After all, tomorrow is never guaranteed. So if this is going to be his final moment, he refuses to die with regrets. As Dante moves in to finish him, Han Kang-san entrusts everything else to our protagonist. And just like that, he loses his head. Once the fight is over, Dante Orca suggests they start moving, believing they have already lost Gu Mansu. Meanwhile, Dio acts arrogantly, blaming his brother and saying none of this would have happened if he had stepped in sooner. Regardless, before leaving, he says he still has something to settle with Han Kangsan. Suddenly, the president opens his eyes. It's as if he just woke up from a nightmare. Reaching for his glasses, he wonders why he suddenly has such a bad feeling, and what could possibly be happening. Meanwhile, we shift back to our protagonist and Du Yuichen's fight. The guy seems to be holding his own just fine. He is even forcing our protagonist back, putting him on the defensive. Unfortunately for him, our protagonist was only gauging him. Our protagonist explains that the fighting technique Du Yuichen is using is called anomalous. This technique helps the user gain an advantage by inducing mistakes from the opponent through unique feints. However, it comes with a big risk, but Du Yuichen compensates for that risk with his resilient movements. Our protagonist admits to himself that the guy has grown. He has definitely gotten stronger. Sadly for Du Yuichen, our protagonist is done gauging him, meaning it's time to get serious. And just like that, our protagonist draws first blood. Du Yuichen recovers and blocks the next strike, but our protagonist quickly steps forward and delivers another brutal punch that knocks him completely off the ground. Now, Du Yuichan is visibly shocked that our protagonist has gotten serious. Creating some distance, he starts thinking about what he can do next. In the end, he decides on one thing, but before doing it, he suggests that they continue the fight. Meanwhile, in a different location. Wen Kai is listening in on the fight while Kamiya is stretching. Wen Kai suddenly notes that something smells fishy. Kamiya responds by asking what he means, saying he doesn't smell anything. Hearing this, Wen Kai brushes it off, saying it's nothing, and tells Kamiya to keep training since he needs to be ready if he wants to defeat our protagonist. Kamiya continues, while Wen Kai thinks to himself that he can't share his discovery. The guy is too obsessed with our protagonist, so he'll have to wait until Kamiya is gone before reporting to Deadface, though he feels uneasy about it. Apparently, the connection is suddenly lost, because Du Yuichen breaks his phone. Gesturing with his hand, Du Yuichen informs our protagonist about the situation. He explains that he has a wire and that Wen Kai has hacked his phone. Our protagonist listens as Du Yuichen continues, saying he suspects our protagonist's phone has also been hacked. So he suggests they talk after getting rid of their phones. Our protagonist replies that he already threw his phone away on his way there. He adds that he has seen enough of Du Yuichen's skills and demands to know why he called him. Finally, Du Yuichen speaks. He admits that our protagonist has gotten stronger. Honestly, he didn't expect him to actually show up. He then asks what our protagonist would have done if it had been a trap. Our protagonist calmly replies that if it were a trap, Du Yuichen wouldn't have come to his house personally to warn him, nor would he have passed a written note in Korean. This makes Du Yuichen realize he needs to reevaluate things. Our protagonist has exceeded the hound's expectations. However, he believes this also makes things more manageable. Smiling, he says that's a relief, while thinking to himself that if things had been uncertain, he might have just killed our protagonist. The fool still thinks he has a chance. Anyway, he tells our protagonist that he has good news. Du Yuichen reveals that their leader will arrive next week, as he is currently on another mission. For now, the one in charge is the vice leader, Deadface. And that's the reason the hounds have been acting recklessly. Simply put, none of them are being kept in check. In their eyes, our protagonist is the main target. However, Deadface sees things differently. He believes President Lee Bong-won is the true priority target. The reason is simple. Lee Bong-won poses an underlying threat. Apparently, he has the means to rally the entire country, as well as people overseas, against the Neville family. In simple terms, Lee Bong-won is dangerous and too troublesome to be left alone. Because of this, the vice leader and Wen Kai are intentionally keeping our protagonist's location hidden from the other members. After explaining everything, Du Yuichen tosses something to our protagonist and tells him to make good use of the information. Our protagonist catches it and realizes it's a phone. Du Yuichen explains that this is the only chance he'll get, since their main leader hasn't arrived yet. Inside his car, our protagonist examines the satellite phone he was given. It will be their means of communication. He reflects on his last conversation with Du Yuichen. Apparently, the guy even placed trackers on Kamiya and the Vero brothers. He couldn't tag the others because he was afraid of being discovered. Back then, our protagonist asked him why he was helping. Du Yuichen honestly replied that whatever happens between him and the hounds is none of his business. As our protagonist already knows, he hates both Korea and the Neville family. Basically, he doesn't care what happens. even if both sides destroy each other. Thinking back on that conversation, our protagonist realizes that if what he said is true, then the information he provided will be extremely useful. Still, he finds it strange that Du Yuikan doesn't hold any grudge against President Lee Bong-won. Since he isn't completely certain about the information, he decides to keep everything to himself for now. The scene then shifts to another location. Han Kang-san's reinforcements have finally arrived, but they are too late. Seeing the situation, the men break down in tears. Piljo loudly orders them to close their eyes while trying to hold back his own tears. The men obey with gritted teeth. Meanwhile, Gu Monsu also arrives and is left in shock. Just moments ago, Han Kang-san promised they would meet again. Now, he's dead. Worse still, that little Vero bastard left his corpse unrecognizable. Meanwhile, Oh Nam Wong calls the president. Lee Bong-won doesn't respond. Earlier, out of concern, the president had told Han Kang-san to be careful. He believed it was unlikely he would run into trouble, but if anything happened, he insisted that Han Kang-san should avoid fighting. Back then, Han Kang-san reassured him not to worry. After all, he was no longer the immature man the president once knew. He personally promised that everything would be fine. But now, he's dead. Fed up, the president finally snaps and enters his villain arc. Calling out to Oh Nam Wong, he orders him to summon everyone across Korea, because this time, heads are going to roll. In the next scene, Du Yuichun sits on the edge of a building. He recalls a previous conversation he had with our protagonist. After telling him everything he knew, he told Cha Si-hyuk that it was up to him whether to believe it or not. Before leaving, he asked our protagonist what really happened after he left Korea. More specifically, how Lee Gwang-won became president instead of his older brother. Thinking back on it now, he finds the whole situation quite interesting. Elsewhere, Deadface asks Wen Kai for his report. Wen Kai informs him about the sudden disconnection of Du Hchan's phone. He finds it suspicious that the phone disconnected during the clash with our protagonist, especially since the fight didn't seem natural from the start. When Deadface asks about Kamiya, Wen Kai assures him that Kamiya is fine and is reporting from a distance. He then asks about the situation on Deadface's end. In response, the vice leader tells him that preparations are almost complete. Before ending the call, Wen Kai adds that it's not just Kamiya who is restless. Both the Vero brothers and Du Euchun are disobedient, making it hard to stop them from doing something reckless. Hearing this, Deadface says he'll call him later. At that moment, Wen Kai asks what they should do about Du Euchun. Deadface doesn't respond immediately because he's busy. After paying the men who arranged the meeting, he finally answers. He tells Wen Kai that there's no way to confirm what happened with Du Euchun, so they can't make a decision based purely on speculation. Instead, he instructs Wen Kai to keep an eye on things. Once Wen Kai agrees, Deadface ends the call. As for the person Deadface came to meet, it's the same old man from before. The old man asks why Deadface came to see him. Deadface responds by pointing out that it's dangerous for someone like him to be without bodyguards in his current state. The old man fires back with a jab, asking if he really needs protection against amateurs like the hounds. Getting straight to the point, Deadface politely asks the old man to ensure that the association doesn't get involved. Hearing this, the old man asks whether that's a threat or a favor. In response, Deadface explains that the association is a neutral faction. Their principle is to act according to agreements and rules. In other words, they would take action if the Neville family threatens peace. However, he questions whether that same peace was upheld in Korea. What he's implying is that the association should have acted the moment our protagonist made a move to kill Lee Gwang-won. Doing so would have preserved balance. The old man counters by reminding him that Lee Gwang-won was acting as their dog and did so without the Neville family's support. Therefore, our protagonist killing him was justified. Hearing this, Deadface suspects that the old man has ties to the association. The old man doesn't respond. Because of this, Deadface continues, saying that if the association gets involved in Korea, it will lead to a power struggle between them and the Neville family. At this point, it's clear there are three major forces: Lee Bong-won and the assassins in Korea, the Neville family, and the association. Regardless, Deadface turns to leave, hoping that the Great Elder's judgment won't make things worse. In response, the old man says that blood is thicker than water, expressing irritation at how they resort to threats when things don't go their way. He calls out Deadface, presumably by his real name, Konstantinov, and tells him that if he won't act against the association, then he should at least keep things contained. With that, Deadface gives the order to proceed. Meanwhile, somewhere in Chinatown, a woman receives his order but complains about the hassle of the task. Still, she accepts it because of her connection to Wen Kai. The baddie is Lin Xiao, the leader of the Black Gold clan. She asks if he's sure about gathering all Neville family operatives in Korea. Understanding her intent, Deadface tells her to summon everyone and that the payment will be left at the agreed location. Shifting back to Wen Kai, Kamiya asks if there's still no information about our protagonist's location. Wen Kai tells him not to be impatient. But Kamiya points out that Wen Kai said his friends from the Black Gold clan were handling it, making it suspicious that it's taking so long. Because of this, he directly asks Wen Kai if he's hiding something. Seeing his reaction, Wen Kai feels helpless. While he managed to feed indirect information to the Vero brothers in exchange for money, Kamiya is a complete wildcard. He could ruin everything. Thinking quickly, Wen Kai asks Kamiya what he hates the most. Kamiya answers, saying it betrayal. Wen Kai follows up by asking what it means to lie to a friend. Kamiya gives the same answer. At this point, Wen Kai is basically gaslighting him into questioning himself. In the end, Kamiya admits his mistake and apologizes for doubting him. Wen Kai is impressed. Meanwhile, a group of men has been waiting nearby, one of them complaining that they're being ignored. Turning to them, Wen Kai asks if they heard the conversation, mentioning that his friend hates dishonesty. He then says it's time to take revenge for their former boss. One of the men responds that they hold no grudge against the new president. Apparently, they only worked for Li Guangwan for the money, nothing personal. Hearing this, Wen Kai calls him a fool. He points out that the man's younger brother accepted a position as one of Li Guangwan's Zodiac members, making things more complicated. The man begins to sweat as Kamiya locks onto him as his target. Another man steps forward, calling Wen Kai and Kamiya a bunch of lunatics. He asks if they expect them to do a job without getting paid. He makes it clear he wants nothing to do with them. Suddenly, Kamiya leaps forward and grabs him, stunning everyone. The man tells him to let go, but Kamiya's expression turns serious. He insists that he's not going anywhere. Slowly, he begins crushing the man's hand. Gritting his teeth, the man becomes enraged and tries to pull out a knife, but Kamiya punches him straight in the face. Everyone watches in shock as the man drops like a sack of trash. But Kamiya isn't done. Grabbing him again, he says he hates disloyal people, and then throws him like he weighs nothing. As Kamiya approaches, the remaining men prepare to draw their weapons, but Wen Kai stops them, asking if they're stupid enough to escalate things. He gives them two options: attack Kamiya, which would be great for Kamiya, or surrender, which would be great for him. The choice is theirs. Seeing their hesitation, Kamiya already has his answer. He continues advancing toward the man he threw. Fed up, the man charges first, calling them arrogant bastards. Unsurprisingly, Kamiya stops him easily and follows up with a brutal cross. That punch definitely breaks something. As the man drops to his knees, Kamiya casually remarks that people usually last 3 to 4 hits. So he's curious to see how much punishment this one can endure. The others can only watch in shock as Kamiya continues the beatdown. At this point, the man has become an unfortunate scapegoat. Meanwhile, Wen Kai uses this moment to address the group. He admits they are short on manpower, but also acknowledges that these men are among the strongest in Korea. What he wants is simple. He asks them to lend him their strength. Later, Wen Kai receives a call from Lin Xiao. Answering it, he asks what's going on. She responds by asking what he did, informing him that Li Guangwan has already started making his move. Confused, Wen Kai asks what she means. She tells him that Han Kangsan is dead, and that his little ugly friend messing with the corpse is what triggered everything. Still trying to process it, Wen Kai asks if she means the man with the man bun. She confirms, adding that the man was the Dosan Snake Zodiac and played a key role in uniting Li Guangwan's forces. If it weren't for him, the president they see today might not even exist. Because of this, Li Guangwan has issued a nationwide summon. Anyone who knew Han Kangsan will naturally gather under him. Now Wen Kai begins to understand the gravity of the situation. He tells her he'll call her back. He never imagined Han Kangsan was someone so important. His death has turned into a full-blown disaster. All he can do now is curse the foolish Dio for causing unnecessary trouble, especially after he had warned him not to be careless. Without wasting time, he contacts the vice leader. He informs him that their plan has gone south. We then shift to Han Kangsan's memorial. President Lee Bong-won accidentally trips and falls. Still, he gets back up on his own, moving forward on one leg without assistance. Everyone watches in silence as he pays his respects. At this point, the man is clearly on a mission. Moments later, Oh Nam-wong informs him that all the men have gathered. Considering this involves the Neville family, this is the most they could assemble in such a short time. Even so, Lee Bong-won is impressed, commenting that the men look full of spirit. Among them are the remaining members of the previous generation of Zodiac assassins. Two of them begin discussing the situation. Jo Jun-yong, the Zodiac rabbit, expresses surprise that only the two of them showed up. He questions whether the others have lost their loyalty, especially considering how much Han Kangsan helped them. Kim Jinzio, the former Zodiac tiger, believes they're simply scared. If Han Kangsan were still alive, they would have been dragged here whether they liked it or not. Still, Rabbit shrugs it off, saying it's fine. Apparently, he doesn't even want to see those cowards again and plans to cut them off completely. Regardless, both admit they were never interested in war. But knowing those bastards desecrated Han Kangsan's body, they can't just sit back and do nothing. Jo Jun-yong then looks at President Lee Bong-won, believing the young master feels the same. He expected the man to be broken by the incident, but instead, he looks completely resolute. Soon, President Lee Bong-won addresses everyone. Assuming they already know why they've been summoned, he speaks bluntly. He admits that they are not in a position to win. After all, their enemy is the Neville family. So he understands if anyone isn't ready and gives them the chance to leave. But no one moves. Everyone stands their ground. The president rises, and memories of Han Kangsan flash through his mind. He reminds them once again, Han Kangsan is dead, and they won't fare any better. So they should abandon any thoughts of an easy death. After all, what they're about to do is a suicide mission, and as for him, he has no intention of choosing peace. The next scene shifts to the vice leader and Du Ikin. While walking, he tells Wen Kai to report on the president's movements. Wen Kai responds that, just as their intel suggested, the president is coming straight for them. He's already closing in on the Vero brothers, so it's only natural to assume he's heading toward their location as well. At the same time, the Black Gold clan is tracking our protagonist, who is also on the move. Wen Kai admits that the whole situation feels strange. It's almost as if both sides already know their location and are simply following each other's trail. Hearing this, the vice leader considers the possibility that our protagonist is heading straight for Wen Kai, so he tells him to stay at the stronghold. They'll join him after handling their current situation. In response, Wen Kai reveals that they are already at the stronghold, but something still feels off. The vice leader tells him to remain on standby, assuring him that they'll arrive without delay. Shifting to Dante Orca and his younger brother, Deadface tells them to wrap things up quickly. Dante agrees, saying he'll finish everything in 10 minutes. At that moment, they are intercepted by Lee Bong-won's forces. Du Ichen notes that there are a lot of enemies. Because of this, Deadface warns him he's only going to say this once and there won't be a second chance. Of course, Du Ichen understands the message. Meanwhile, Piljo stares at them with interest. Without hesitation, he orders his men to take their positions. He reassures them not to be afraid. After all, he'll be taking the lead. With that, Piljo charges forward. Deadface reacts instantly, dodging the attack in a flash. The strike tears through his clothes. In response, Deadface draws his knife, commenting on their fighting spirit. And just like that, all of Lee Bong-won's men charge at him at once. Mid-fight, Dio Vero becomes annoyed. He demands to know if his brother has gone mad, leaving his weapon behind just because he was coming to the chapel. Even more shocking, this isn't the first time he's pulled this stunt. Even without a weapon, Dante's fists hit like a truck coon. With a single strike, he sends Lee Bong-won's men flying. Because of this, two men launch a coordinated attack. Dante manages to block one, but takes a kick in the process. The two attackers turn out to be newly recruited Zodiac members. Still, Dante keeps throwing punches like it's a get hit once, get two free deal. As he prepares to throw another punch, he suddenly pauses mid-motion. In that instant, Lee Bong-won's men manage to grab him. Immediately, Ma Hyun-woo orders them to pin him down and stick to the plan. Two men attempt to put Dante in a chokehold, but he easily breaks free, smashing them together in the process. Still, the two Zodiac members charge forward again and tackle him at the same time. Their goal is to push him off the top floor. and they almost succeed. Suddenly, Dante grabs both of them. Before they even realize what's happening, he tosses them over. Just like that, the two meet their end, leaving everyone in shock. But at that moment, No.1 appears and the men immediately make way for him. Seeing their stunned expressions, he calmly tells them to handle the small fry. As for him, he wants to face Dante alone. Before their battle begins, the scene switches to Du Yuichen. Half of the men are already down, so it's time for the previous generation Zodiacs to step in. Seeing Kim Jinzeo, Du Yuchan asks if he really came alone. He calls him reckless, but suddenly, Zhou Junyong appears from above. In one swift motion, he restrains Du Yuchen while blocking his counterattack. Zhou Junyong tries to take a more reasonable approach. He tells Du Yuchen to stop, considering their past relationship. He even suggests letting him live for the sake of the president. But in that very moment, Du Yuichen catches him off guard. And just like that, Zhou Junyong loses his head. Kim Jinseo is horrified. He charges forward and throws a punch. But Du Yuichen is too fast. He smoothly sidesteps, circles around him, twists his arm, and follows up with a kick that sweeps him off his feet. Without hesitation, he moves in to drive his knife into Kim Jinseo's head, but pauses midway, just to remind him of his place. He repeats his own words back to him, that the weak have no choice. Furious, Kim Jinseo demands to know how he could do this. He asks if Du Yuichen has forgotten that President Li Bong-wan took care of him after the previous Zodiac Dragon died. Fed up, Du Yuichen ends him without hesitation. Li Bong-wan's men can only watch in shock. Du Yuichen shows no remorse. Instead, he coldly declares that the reunion is over. Meanwhile, Wen Kai is desperately trying to make a call. He demands to know our protagonist's location. In response, Lin Zhao tells him they've lost track of him, making it difficult to determine where he is. Wen Kai nearly loses his temper, reminding her that he warned her to stay close to the target. He's about to ask for anything that might help, but the call suddenly ends. Apparently, the baddie doesn't like being yelled at. Meanwhile, Kamiya is lost in thought about our protagonist. Back then, our protagonist told him he would be leaving the group, but because Kamiya is completely unhinged, he interpreted it as betrayal. And our protagonist didn't back down from his decision. Because of this, Kamiya can't wait to meet him again. Since he believes our protagonist always looked down on them, it only makes him want to crush him even more. In the next chapter, one of Li Bong's men reports to the president that Piljo and Oh-Nam-Wang have started attacking according to plan. President Li Bong nods after hearing this. He says it's up to them now, excluding our protagonist. The two men are the strongest assassins in Korea. Meanwhile, Piljo is engaged in combat with Deadface. Using his weapon like an extension of his body, he plants his hammer on a tree and uses the momentum to attack. However, Deadface quickly dodges. Seeing this, Piljo realizes the guy is actually faster than him. His reflexes are no joke. In addition, Deadface is quick-witted and makes good judgments. Piljo never imagined a day would come when he'd be outdone in speed. Perhaps this is time finally catching up to him. Regardless, he needs to give it all he's got before his endurance reaches its limit. While their fight continues, the scene shifts to Oh-Nam-Wang and Dante Orca. Dante lunges first with a straight punch, but Oh-Nam-Wang dodges and responds with a heavy hook. My guy really felt that one. As Dante is in the middle of launching another punch, Oh-Nam-Wang counters with a clean straight, basically landing a 1-2 combo. Dante Orca is somewhat impressed. Apparently, he has found a worthy opponent. Meanwhile, his younger brother is shocked to see him getting pushed back. Oh-Nam-Wang's strength is completely different from the Zodiac members. Well, this is only happening because they were caught off guard and didn't have their weapons. Still, he hopes his brother doesn't lose to Oh-Nam-Wang, because if that happens, he swears he won't let him off. Just as Oh-Nam-Wang prepares another counter-strike, Dante tanks the hit and uses the opportunity to grab his suit. Oh-Nam-Wang responds with an elbow strike, but Dante tanks that as well and finally grabs him with both hands. With this, he makes it clear, this isn't boxing, and now Oh-Nam-Wang can't escape. After saying that, he gives Oh-Nam-Wang a headbutt, like he owes him money. Seeing this, his men watching express shock. Meanwhile, Dante grabs him, lifts him up, and drives his knee straight into Oh-Nam-Wang's torso. As a result, he coughs out blood, but still manages to grab Dante Orca. Seeing this, Dante tells him to stop resisting while trying to slam him to the floor like the previous Zodiacs. While airborne, Oh-Nam-Wang responds by grabbing Dante. Seeing Dante trying to resist, Oh Nam Wong taunts him using his own words. Our man is determined to bring him down with him. However, Dante somehow manages to stop him before tossing him aside with one hand. Oh Nam Wong is sent flying, landing like a rag doll. Dante approaches him while complaining. He asks why these guys are so bent on dying together before the fight continues. The scene returns to Piljo and Deadface. During the fight, Deadface accidentally drops his glasses, allowing Piljo, now battered, to get a close look at his eyes. He recognizes something and says he is honored to face someone of that bloodline. Hearing this, Deadface admits Piljo is indeed good, a great opponent. In addition, he didn't expect someone of his skill level to still be in Korea, and notes that his fighting style is similar to Duiken. However, Piljo has seen something he shouldn't have. As a result, he needs to die. Meanwhile, Wenkai is visibly frustrated that he can't reach anyone and wonders what's happening. At the same time, Kamiya suddenly gets up. He walks as if possessed, ignoring Wenkai, who asks what's going on with him. Kamiya doesn't respond. At the same time, we enter the president's thoughts. He has already received information that his strongest men are struggling. Since it has come to this, he can only hope things have been taken care of. Apparently, their entire plan revolves around deception and is meant to buy our protagonist enough time. In simple terms, our protagonist is the major piece he is counting on for the success of this plan. In the next chapter, a lady in a nun outfit appears. She comments on Korea, saying the night view is really beautiful. Her companion, who is eating a burger, tells her to hurry up, saying they don't have time. With that, she approaches and joins the group. Meanwhile, the leader informs the group about their mission. He says that, according to Yukjon's favor, all they need to do is chase the hounds away, and the rest will be handled by the association. Just like that, everything will be resolved with ease. These people are the enforcement team of the association, known as Blue Hawk. The storyline then skips back, presumably after our protagonist's warning about the hounds. President Lee Bong calls someone, asking if it's really true that the hounds are coming. On the other side, the old man turns out to be Yukjon. He nods and explains that Deadface came to deliver a warning. Apparently, the old man is also a former senior member of the association. He adds that friction will be unavoidable if the association interferes, but assures Lee Bong not to worry. The association plans to split Korea and the Neville family by using this opportunity. It will benefit them if their rival organization, the Neville family, loses power. In response, the president reminds him that their true enemy is the Neville family, and they likely already have countermeasures prepared. The old man agrees, but reveals that the leader of the hounds is currently heading to the association headquarters for negotiations. Because of this, they need to move fast, or they will miss their chance. In other words, they will have to face the hounds without the association knowing. The thought alone is chilling. As for the reason, one of the 8 most powerful assassins in the world happens to be Ivan Cardiff, and he is also the leader of the hounds. Speaking of the hounds, each member is strong enough to compete among the top 8 assassins in the world, automatically making them the strongest assassin team. Back to the call, the president informs Yukjon that they will make their own move in case things go bad. There is no doubt that the hounds are the most formidable assassins. However, he reminds Yukjon that they still have our protagonist. Meanwhile, the scene cuts to our protagonist, who is about to face Kamiya and Wenkai. Wenkai begins to piece things together, realizing that the protagonist ambushed them at a precise location. From how the others were attacked at the same time, he becomes certain, just as he suspected earlier, that their companion, Du Yoichin, has betrayed them. Meanwhile, Kamiya calls out to Wenkai, interrupting his thoughts. He suggests that Wenkai stay back since he cannot fight and is only useful for reconnaissance. The man agrees and tells him to return the favor later, and Kamiya is 100% ready to do so. Meanwhile, our protagonist stares at Kamiya, realizing it has been 9 years. Since they grew up together, he can recognize Kamiya just by looking at him. He also admits that the guy has grown and looks much stronger. However, Kamiya calls out to him, interrupting his thoughts. He suggests they make up for lost time by having a conversation during battle. Our protagonist taunts him, saying he's a bit busy. Meanwhile, Wenkai observes from the side and thinks the protagonist is quite bold. Their isolated location in the deserted mountains makes it perfect. No restrictions on weapons, not to mention the possibility of their vice captain arriving. Even with all these factors in mind, the protagonist still radiates confidence. Just like that, the fight begins. Our protagonist fires multiple shots while Kamiya leaps toward cover. Seeing this, Wenkai tries to provide suppression fire. In response, our protagonist runs toward him, leaps into the air, and fires 2 shots, one successfully hitting Wenkai's shoulder. The fool collapses, gritting his teeth in pain. As expected, he doesn't have plot armor, and he realizes he is nothing more than a distraction. Meanwhile, our protagonist uses the opportunity to reload his gun. Kamiya observes him and thinks to himself that his aim is as precise as ever. Since he doesn't stand a chance in a long-range fight, he needs to close the distance. Because of this, he lifts a chair with both hands and throws it straight at the protagonist, intending to use it as cover. Our protagonist sees through his plan, but notes that the cover is too thin. To his surprise, however, Kamiya uses the chair as a distraction. Still, our protagonist reacts in time and dodges all of Kamiya's bullets. Kamiya lands on the ground. He has finally closed the distance. Now it's time for close combat. He knocks the gun out of the protagonist's hand. Our protagonist sees a bullet coming. Lowering his body, he dodges all of Kamiya's shots. He responds by slashing with his knife, but Kamiya dodges. Just like that, the 2 men begin an intense close-range fight. However, our protagonist quickly gains the upper hand. He suddenly drives his blade into Kamiya's wrist. Kamiya sees this and tries to fire, but our protagonist points the gun downward. Because of this, Kamiya tries to create distance, using the protagonist as leverage. To his shock, the gun doesn't fire even though he had a perfect aim. Recovering quickly, Kamiya looks at the gun and is left stunned. The gun is jammed. Seeing this, our protagonist calls out to Kamiya, telling him that they both know that's not where his strength lies. So he challenges him to a proper fight, insisting he take out his blade. Apparently, the earlier clash was just a warm-up. Now, the real fight begins.